and the island of Tomla that form an integral part of the territory of Mauritius. The Chagos archipelago was illegally excised by the United Kingdom from the territory of Mauritius prior to its accession to independence, in breach of international law and resolutions of this Assembly. In the wake of this illegal excision, the Mauritians who were residing at the time in the Chagos archipelago were forcibly evicted by the British authorities from the archipelago in total disregard of human rights. Most of them were moved to the main island of Mauritius. The government of Mauritius is fully sensitive to their plight and to their legitimate aspiration as Mauritian citizens to resettle in the archipelago. Mr. President, Mauritius welcomes the award of the Arbitral Tribunal delivered on 18th March 2015 against the United Kingdom under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We welcome the tribunal's decision that the marine protected area purportedly declared by the United Kingdom around the Chagos archipelago was established in violation of international law. We also welcome the tribunal's unanimous recognition that Mauritius has an interest in significant decisions bearing upon the uses of the archipelago pending its return to the effective control of Mauritius. This arbitral proceeding was the first occasion on which any international judge or arbitrator has considered the fact and history lying behind Mauritius' entitlement to sovereignty over the Chagos archipelago. Mauritius appreciates the fact that two arbitrators have confirmed the opinion that the United Kingdom is not the coastal state in relation to the Chagos archipelago. This view has not been contradicted by any other judge or arbitrator. This, no doubt, confirms our stand that the Chagos archipelago is and has always been an integral part of the territory of Mauritius. Mr. President, the Tribunal underscores United Kingdom's legally binding obligations to Mauritius. These establish beyond doubt that in international law, Mauritius has real, firm, and binding rights over the Chagos archipelago, and that the United Kingdom must respect those rights. The Tribunal recognized that Mauritius has a legal interest in the Chagos archipelago, such that decisions affecting its future use cannot be taken without the involvement of Mauritius. Mr. President, despite this clear ruling of the Tribunal, we regret that the United Kingdom appears to be adopting a different approach to the rights of Mauritius. It has recently launched a so-called consultation exercise on purported resettlement of Mauritians of Chagosian origin in the Chagos archipelago under conditions amounting again to a gross violation of the most basic human rights. Mauritius rejects unreservedly this purported consultation exercise. We wish to assure the international community that once Mauritius is able to effectively exercise its sovereignty over the Chagos archipelago, our brothers and sisters of Chagosian origin who resettle in the archipelago will be able to live in dignity and enjoy their basic human rights as they currently do in Mauritius. Mr. President, considering the award of the Tribunal, we urge the United States of America, which is currently using Diego Garcia for defense purposes, to engage in discussions with Mauritius regarding the long-term interests of Mauritius in respect of Chagos archipelago. The more so after the affirmation by the President of the United States of America when he so convincingly stated in his speech to this Assembly on Monday, I quote, "We cannot stand by when the sovereignty and territorial integrity of a nation is flagrantly violated," unquote. Mr. President, the government of Mauritius is resolutely committed to pursue all efforts in accordance with international law for the effective exercise by Mauritius of its sovereignty over the Chagos archipelago, including the possibility of further recourse to judicial or arbitral bodies. And we urge this Assembly and the international community at large to support Mauritius in its legitimate endeavors. In this regard, this Assembly has a direct institutional interest in the resolution of this matter. The Assembly, of course, has historically played a central role in addressing decolonization through the exercise of its powers and functions, especially in relation to Chapters 11 through 13 of the United Nations Charter. Under its Resolution 15 of 14th December 1960 on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples, this Assembly declared that any attempt aimed at the disruption of the territorial integrity of such a country is incompatible with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. In Resolution 2666-20 of 16th December 1965, a resolution dealing especially with Mauritius, the Assembly drew attention to the duty of the administrating power not to dismember the territory and not to violate the territorial integrity of the then colony. Therefore, this Assembly has the responsibility in helping to complete the historic process of decolonization, which it was so successful in instigating and overseeing in the second half of the last century. This is why, Mr. President, we are convinced that this Assembly should now establish a mechanism to allow and monitor the full implementation of the UNGA resolutions. Mr. President, I take this opportunity to express the deep appreciation of Mauritius for the unflinching support it has consistently received from members of the African Union, the Non-Aligned Movement, and the Group of 77, and China and other friendly countries for its sovereignty over the Chagos Archipelago. Mr. President, as regards Tromelin, we urge France to pursue dialogue with Mauritius for the easy resolution of the dispute over the island in the spirit of friendship that has always characterized the relationship between the two countries.
We know that we can count on the nobility of France and its ideals of justice and fraternity so that the Republic of Mauritius can fully enjoy its effective sovereignty over Tromelin.
I will conclude by saying that for peace, security, and inclusive and sustainable development to prevail in our respective countries, we need to act with our heart. Only then we will succeed in building the world we all dream of. We should inspire ourselves from the wisdom-packed message of Pope Francis, who blessed us with his presence in this assembly last week. He so magnanimously said, I quote, "It must never be forgotten that political and economic activity is only effective when it is understood as a prudential activity, guided by a perennial concept of justice and constantly conscious of the fact that above and beyond our plans and programs, we are dealing with real men and women who live, struggle, and suffer, and are often forced to live in great poverty, deprived of all rights." Thank you, Mr. President.
En nombre de la Asamblea.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the Republic of Mauritius for the statement just made and request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency Timothy Harris, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency?
Me complace dar la
I have the great pleasure in welcoming the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, His Excellency Timothy Harris, I invite him to address the General Assembly.
Thank you. Mr. President, Excellencies, it is indeed an honor for me to address this august body of the United Nations in my capacity as Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. This privilege of service has been bestowed on me following the people's historic victory at the polls in February of this year. I take pleasure in sharing the perspectives of the government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis and matters before this 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly. My delegation is pleased that the focus of your theme, the United Nations at 70, a new commitment to action, will shed special light on the Sustainable Development Goals, which form the basis of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We are in full agreement with you that the new Partnerships for Sustainable Development will be at the center of the work program of the United Nations until the year 2030. We are optimistic, Mr. President, that the post-2015 development agenda, when taken in conjunction with the recently adopted Addis Ababa Action Agenda and a forward-looking and responsible outcome in December at the COP21 Paris Climate Change Conference, all together represent a courageous step forward for humanity, which will, if fully implemented, yield the kind of future that our children and grandchildren deserve. So onward with action. We are reminded that action is required to create decent jobs for our people, build schools for our children, deliver quality health care for all, and provide affordable homes to our working mothers and fathers. Be assured, Mr. President, that St. Kitts and Nevis stands committed to the process of implementation, which of course must include a robust, systematic, and effective monitoring and review process. Climate change for us is of utmost importance. It must never be placed on the proverbial back burner. I dare submit that for small island developing states like St. Kitts and Nevis, it remains an existential threat. Our well-being in its economic, social, and environmental dimensions is threatened by natural disasters, devastating floods, sea level rise, persistent drought, coastal erosion, and ocean acidification. These acts of nature have capacity to undermine our economic growth. They threaten food security, and they bring hardships on our people. The challenge to our vital tourism industry is unsettling, and the loss of entire coastal communities is devastating to our islands. The current situation in Dominica represents what islands face when dealing with climate change, and we call on the international community to do more to help small island developing states adapt and adjust. We would like consideration be given not just to climate change adaptation and mitigation, but also disaster response, recovery, and insurance. Mr. President, while we speak of adaptation to climate change and the wider issue of disaster risk mitigation, it is incumbent on us to underscore the significant financial burden placed on national budgets to implement projects designed to build resilience and increase our chances of survival in the face of climate events. Access to global funding mechanisms, such as the Green Climate Fund, is of critical importance to us. For too long, we have been hamstrung by complex application procedures which have prevented us from accessing vital funds to enable us to achieve sustainable development. We welcome the recent decision by the Green Climate Fund Board to aim for a floor of 50% of the adaptation allocation for particularly vulnerable countries. We welcome the importance placed on filling capacity gaps in accessing and managing climate finance. Access to finance, if it is to be meaningful, must be simplified and it must be timely. My delegation welcomes the establishment of the SIDS Docks facility, which will serve as a clearinghouse for implementation of climate-related projects in small island developing states. We acknowledge the assistance provided by our partners in development. We are convinced that working closely with our partners to build effective and meaningful partnerships will accelerate the pathway to achieving sustainable development in all its dimensions. St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. President, has emerged as a leader in renewable energy development in the Caribbean. Even now, our country has a mix of wind and solar in our energy grid. By 2016, we shall add waste to energy, and by 2018, we shall add geothermal energy on the island of Nevis. We are working assiduously to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and so reduce our carbon footprint. In this ambitious agenda, I thank all our international partners who have lent their technical assistance and expertise in advancing the renewable energy trust in my country. Mr. President, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis is fully committed to social equity, justice, people's empowerment, good governance, transparency, and of course, prosperity for all. We are a people's government born out of the desire to put the development of our people first. Hence, we are hoping to build broader constituencies of support and several fronts in addressing the crime problem. At home, we instituted a 6-point plan in our fight to reduce violent crimes in particular. We are investing in new equipment and training to support our law enforcement professionals who prevent, detect, and solve crimes. We are working hard to build a new professional culture among and between our law enforcement agencies. And we are encouraged by new statistics pointing to a decline in major crimes in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And yet we accept that much more still needs to be done. Therefore, our government is determined to aggressively confront the issues of crime. We will work on multiple tracks, including working to empower families and communities through education, skills development initiatives, and of course, civic programs. We will work in the schools with NGOs and our religious leaders and with the youth themselves, especially those most likely to become targets or perpetrators of criminal behavior. We will offer them alternatives. We will offer them opportunities for personal growth, for decent work, and for constructive engagement in our society. This is a challenge to which we are committed and which we have to win. However, if small states are to overcome the challenges posed and exacerbated by transnational criminal activities, we must work in partnership. We need the support of gun-producing countries to restrict the movement of illegal guns, light weapons, and ammunition. Those who produce the firearms must do more to stop them from reaching our shores. We must share information and improve access to opportunities, education, and employment, because sustainable development is not achievable in an environment of crime and violence. The prosperity which must be built brick by brick, day by day, will become realizable only in the context of peaceful and safe societies. Mr. President, St. Kitts and Nevis, like the rest of CARICOM, has consistently lent its voice to the clarion call for greater attention to be paid to the harmful impact of non-communicable diseases to our main resource, our human capital. Indeed, we continue to wrestle with the high incidence of NCDs like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and hypertension in our country and indeed throughout the CARICOM region. We wish to reiterate our call for a stronger global response to combating this in developing countries like ours. We remain hopeful that the inclusion of NCDs in the Sustainable Development Goals and the implementation of the targets and indicators at the national level will serve to reverse the high incidence of NCDs at the national, regional, and global levels. The famous adage, "A nation's health is a nation's wealth," resonates well with us. We would therefore urge the United Nations, through its specialized agencies and regional offices, to play a leading role in this regard. We are pleased with the work of UNAIDS and our own CAF and PANCAP in CARICOM, and we call for continued global solidarity in this endeavor. Indeed, my own country is on track to achieve zero mother-to-child transmission by the end of 2015, and we are committed to the CARICOM region becoming the first region in the world to end AIDS by 2030. Mr. President, my government is pleased to draw the attention of the international community to the invaluable contribution made by the government of the Republic of China, Taiwan, in the areas of international cooperation, health, technology, peace, and security. We live in an age where global partnership is a prerequisite for solving complex problems at the international level. The government of St. Kitts and Nevis is proud to announce that the relationship established over 3 decades ago has yielded benefits in all the areas of sustainable development. This level of engagement between developing country and partner in development is indeed a model fit for consideration by small states like St. Kitts and Nevis in their quest to achieve sustainable development. As we look to models and arrangements for advancing our global agenda, we found pragmatic beneficial value in our Petrocarib agreement with Venezuela in support of poverty alleviation and social cohesion. Venezuela under President Chavez and now President Maduro must be commended for showing the world that there can be a better way and a more helpful way of driving the development agenda. St. Kitts and Nevis is, of course, cognizant of the territorial issues which exist between Venezuela and our CARICOM member state of Guyana. We expect that the leaders of Venezuela and Guyana will resolve these issues peacefully and in accordance with international law. My government stands willing to assist, along with CARICOM, in the resolution of these very challenging issues. Mr. President, St. Kitts and Nevis is indeed pleased by the recent decision by the governments of Cuba and the United States of America to reestablish diplomatic relations. This resolution has long been advocated by CARICOM. This is the opportune time for us to usher in a new era of regional partnership and cooperation. My own country has benefited substantially from capacity building in the areas of education and health due to partnership with Cuba. We applaud several prescriptions outlined in President Castro's address to this Assembly, calling for better arrangements for Caribbean countries and for special and differential treatment. We concur that the issue of reparation must be seen in the broader context of the evil of slavery and its lingering negative impact on the development of the Caribbean. Reparation has to be considered as a pathway to addressing the perennial disadvantages that slavery has caused to our economies and our societies. In conclusion, Mr. President, as part of our development agenda, St. Kitts and Nevis will work daily to ensure that every citizen has access to high-quality health care, a 21st century education, decent work, and an improved quality of life consistent with the 2030 SDG agenda. We remain eager to work within the United Nations system, but the United Nations must be re-energized, retooled, and refocused to meet the challenges of the 21st century. In fact, we want to see a United Nations strengthened and reflective of the reality of our world, the needs of its membership, and the wishes of our diverse and swelling populations. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we are building a modern, responsible, and responsive society rooted in democracy and the rule of law. We are optimistic that in the months and years ahead, the United Nations and its specialized agencies will be more robust, nimble, modern, and responsive in order to be able to prevent crises in ways that effectively improve lives. It is through these type of commitments and action that we will transform our beloved St. Kitts and Nevis, the United Nations, and indeed the world. I thank you, and may God bless the people and country of St. Kitts and Nevis.
En nombre de la Asamblea.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis for the statement just made and would request protocol to escort His Excellency.
La Asamblea escuchará ahora.
The Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency Edi Rama, Prime Minister of the Republic of Albania.
Pido.
May I request protocol to escort His Excellency? I have great pleasure in welcoming the Prime Minister of the Republic of Albania, His Excellency Edi Rama, and invite him to address the General Assembly.
Mrs. President, ladies and gentlemen, 1 year ago, Pope Francis started his visits in Europe from Albania. We saw last week, here in America, the hope and joy he could bring to the richest and most powerful country in the world. Imagine the joy he brought to us, not least by the praise he bestowed upon Albania in saying we were proof that the peaceful and fruitful coexistence between people and communities belonging to different religions is not only beneficial, but is concretely possible and practical. We are rightly proud of this heritage, of being, in Pope Francis' words, a religious fraternity. As a lived experience, at a time when religious extremism, violence, and terrorism are causing unspeakable suffering. Violence and extremism that have put multitudes of people on the move in scenes reminiscent of the Exodus in the biblical times of children, women, and men arriving in their thousands on our doorsteps in the Balkans as they seek safety and protection in Europe. As you probably know, ethnically motivated conflicts and violence are not strangers to us in the Balkans. Today, however, we as a region can finally dare to look ahead with hope and show that another way forward is possible. For the first time last year, after 100 years of frozen or live conflicts and in the Balkans, guns were no longer pointed against any neighboring window. After a century scarred by conflict, finally a year of cooperation to make the peace we have achieved a peace worth living. The talks between Serbia and Kosovo, a new state contributing to stability in the region, have enabled the two countries to find common solutions for a series of issues and for the good of their peoples. And let me call here upon all amongst you that have not yet recognized Kosovo to do it, and by doing so, to give a straightforward contribution for strengthening stability, peace and cooperation in a region that last year has become a significant success story of hopes and dreams for the future, prevailing over fears and nightmares from the past. Kosovo full recognition by all the nations of this assembly will be good for Serbia as well. Moreover, last year I made the first visit of an Albanian Prime Minister to Belgrade after 68 years. And since the Vienna Balkan Summit of August 2015, our region has been successfully developing many collaborations, including the area of youth exchanges, promoted by Albania and Serbia and inspired by the model of youth exchanges among France and Germany after the World War II. We are focusing in particular on this because it is crucial to educate our young people what history has taught us. That it is better to celebrate our differences, not fight over them, to learn from our past, not live in it. No matter the place, no matter the language, no matter the color, no matter the religion. Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations has engaged in an unprecedented conversation with hundreds and thousands of young people. It has developed the Sustainable Development Goals, taking into account their hopes and their expectations. As we affirm our pledge to achieving these goals, let us put the young at the heart of this agenda. Countries, large and small, let's come together to begin the process of developing a global charter that puts education of our young and determination to deliver a better future for them at its heart. We are going to introduce a reform in Albania that will include in the school curriculum such a charter of values. We have also been working hard and make progress in a number of important reforms, including in education, public administration, energy and economic development, justice, and fight against crime. And Albania is eager to be part of a global team that will meet this December in Paris to decide on measures to protect the environment, in line with Sustainable Development Objectives and ENDC goals. This unprecedented event will be effective if, like in a great team, everyone plays a part. Yet, in an era beset by enormous challenges like climate change, violent extremism, poverty, inequality, corruption, and illicit trafficking, first and foremost, let's ensure the future by teaching young people the values of tolerance, respect, and understanding, no matter the place, no matter the language, no matter the color, no matter the religion. Ladies and gentlemen, I was an artist before becoming a politician in office. Indeed, every day, I still like to pick up a pencil or a pen or a paintbrush, even for a few minutes, and draw, doodle, or paint. And all of us are trying to paint our own big picture in our different ways, set out a clear vision, work towards it. If the world were a painting, today it would perhaps be more in gray than black or white. There are few certainties, and there would be many splashes of bright and harsh colors, which warn of many dangers, many threats. But here, in this place, there are values and principles that can apply to all of the challenges we face in the world, and we need them now more than ever. At a time of tragic war and sound of arms, Winston Churchill noted, "Words are the only things which last forever." Let us introduce in words these values and principles of tolerance and respect for diversity of faiths, identities, cultures, histories, and beliefs. All of us, in our school curricula, recognizing the common humanity that we all share. Obviously, global principles and values of tolerance, written down black on white in a global charter, cannot wipe out violent extremism, hatred, stereotypes, discrimination, and the scars they have caused. Yet, these values put in words, to be taught and educated in schools, can be the sustainable bridges that bind hearts and minds to the common action and our world to a better future. The best insurance of a better future are the hearts and minds of our young people. If we show them the right way, they will take it. Let's try to be a bigger team with them by showing first and foremost that we, men, women, individuals, peoples, and the civilization of our world are joined together by our common humanity and must work to build a common and sustainable future for all, no matter the place, no matter the language, no matter the color, no matter the religion. Thank you for your patience and attention.
En nombre de la Asamblea
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the Republic of Albania for the statement just made and request protocol to escort His Excellency. I now give the floor to His Excellency Walid al-Mualem, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Syrian Arab Republic.
السيد رئيس الدورة 70 للجمعية العامة.
President of the 70th session of the General Assembly, I would like to congratulate you on your election as President of the General Assembly at its current session and wish you success in leading the work of this session. I would also like to thank your predecessor for his presidency of the previous session. Ladies and gentlemen, I greet you from this great international edifice that was originally established with all its agencies in order for peace and security to prevail in the world. I greet you as I come from a country where security has been disrupted and peace has departed, a country that lives a fierce war for more than 4 years. I greet you from a land baptized by the blood of its people who fight terrorism and defend their fellow citizens against terrorism, while waiting for this international organization to fulfill its promises and implement its resolutions related to combating terrorism. The resolutions adopted by the Security Council under Chapter 7 are still only ink on paper, mentioned only in press releases and media statements. While on the ground, the countries funding, sponsoring, and supporting terrorism are still fueling extremism in the region. Those countries continue arming, training, and sending terrorists to Syria while being indifferent and unconcerned for the implementation of those resolutions. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, along with the resistant people of Syria, until when will the powerful member states remain to intimidate other member states committed to international law while ignoring those states that disregard Security Council resolutions? What have you done, I ask, to stop these states from executing criminal acts against the Syrian people? Why all this silence? You are witnessing these countries as they spread this extremist ideology until it reached Europe, where it hit as it is hitting the Middle East. While the sleeper cells are waking up, bombings and assassinations have returned once again in the West. What is the guilt, I ask, of the innocent people of your countries who started paying the price of supporting terrorism by some of your politicians? You know better than anyone else that terrorism is an ideology that recognizes no boundaries. You know that when this monster comes out, it cannot be limited to certain countries. The terrorism of ISIS, al-Nusra, and other al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorist organizations is killing the innocent, capturing women, and launching mortar shells on civilians. This terrorism is cutting drinking water and destroying history and civilization landmarks, including those inscribed on the World Heritage List, which is a heritage of all mankind. The last of such crimes was the destruction of the temples of Baal Shamin and Bel and the brutal killing of archaeologists. Why do some of your governments support countries that are used to export their crises outside their borders? Why do you support them while knowing that they only produce destruction? How can developed countries governed by elections and parliaments ally with countries that originally do not have parliaments and do not recognize an active half of the society, being women? How can your countries accept the ideas of sexual jihad, slaughtering, hand-cutting, burning, and systematic destruction of history, monuments, and culture? Ladies and gentlemen, based on the above, I say Syria will continue to fight terrorism in word and in deed, and the Arab Syrian army is capable of cleansing the country of those terrorists. Despite all the sacrifices and high prices paid and that we are still paying, along with the Syrian people from all backgrounds who've paid in life and all other forms in security, economy, and livelihood. I hope that for once you stand for honesty and truth. The duty of the international community is to stop this flow of terrorists coming to Syria from 100 countries, according to United Nations data, in order to create a caliphate state, which, as you all know, will not be limited to Syria or Iraq. The caliphate leaders have frequently stated that their goal stretches from Mecca to all of Europe in order to restore the glory of the caliphate according to their own interpretation. If you do not stop those member states that support terrorism, along with the terrorists they are sending, the fire that has broken out in Syria, Iraq, and Libya will continue to spread beyond. Mr. President, Syria has not stopped advocating to political dialogue and practicing what we preached based on our vision, which proved to be correct, that the fight against terrorism is a priority to move on in other tracks. Syria cannot implement any democratic political measure related to elections or a constitution or the like, while terrorism is striking at home and threatening innocent civilians in the country. How can we ask the Syrian people to head to the ballot box while they are not safe in the streets and inside their homes, while they are under the missiles and mortar shells launched by terrorist groups supported by well-known countries? Nevertheless, we were and still are believers in the political choice, the political dialogue, according to the parameters known to all, namely preservation of national sovereignty, the unity of Syria's territory and people, maintaining the state institutions, developing them and improving their performance, and that the only way to a political solution is through Syrian-led national dialogue without any foreign interference. Based on this, Syria agreed to participate in Geneva II, Moscow I and II. I would like to announce here that Syria agrees to participate in the 4 brainstorming committees of experts proposed by the Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura. Mr. de Mistura has repeatedly confirmed that these committees' role is mainly to exchange ideas and that they will conduct unbinding preliminary consultations whose agreed-upon outputs can be used to prepare for the launching of Geneva III. In the light of this, some imagined that Syria's approval of the political track, regardless of its form, initiative, and names, has a connection to what they portray as the weakness of Syria's army and people on the ground. I want to say that Syria is strong and continues to fight terrorism, and that the Syrian army and the Syrian people are united in the face of terrorism. Let no one think, whoever they may be, that after all these sacrifices and steadfastness for more than 4 years, they could obtain through politics what they could not win in the field,
وأنه سيحقق
or that they will achieve at the negotiating table what they failed to achieve on the ground. The decision of the Syrian people lies in the Syrian people's hand alone, and no one can deny this right. I repeat, the Syrian people's decision lies in the Syrian people's hand alone, and no one can strip the Syrian people of this right. The Syrian Arab army astonished the world with its power and faith and persistence. Mr. President, the important invitation of His Excellency President Vladimir Putin for the establishment of an international regional coalition to counter terrorism received the attention of the Syrian government and its support. Terrorism cannot be fought only from the air, and all of the previous operations to combat it have only led to its spread and outbreak. Airstrikes are useless unless they are conducted in cooperation with the Syrian Arab Army, the only force in Syria that is combating terrorism. The announcement of the beginning of the Russian airstrikes in Syria, which came upon a request from the Syrian government and in coordination with the government, is an effective participation in the support of the Syrian efforts in combating terrorism. The so-called Arab Spring was a spring only for Israel and its undercover and known allies. Israel continues to attack Syria while the world is watching. Israel is arming the terrorists and treating them in its hospitals and helping them with its intelligence services and supporting them to stand between it and the Arab Syrian army across the border. While those terrorists weaken, it intervenes directly through airstrikes or artillery shelling, just as Turkey did and is still doing, whether in Aleppo or in Idlib, and as Saudi Arabia and Qatar are doing, and who are racing to shed Syrian blood through their different instruments. The continued support for terrorists and the escalation of their attacks on citizens in most regions and cities in Syria led to an increase in citizens' need for the basic commodities and services in many areas. The inhuman sanctions imposed by the European Union and the United States exacerbated the living conditions of Syrian civilians. At the same time, my government is cooperating with the United Nations and its humanitarian agencies within the framework of response plans agreed upon with the Syrian government to meet the basic needs of the citizens, especially those forced by the terrorist acts to flee their homes, and many of whom have resorted to some neighboring countries. Some of those countries accommodated them in camps for training on weapons, or what resembles places of detention and isolation.
عزل إنني أؤكد أن الدولة السورية تضمن لمن يرغب.
I stress that the Syrian state guarantees the safe return and decent life for the citizens who are willing to return. At the same time, Syria continues to exert all efforts to deliver aid from international organizations to all Syrian citizens without discrimination wherever they are. Mr. President, the Syrian Arab Republic confirms its adherence to the full restoration of the occupied Syrian Golan Heights until the line of June 4th, 1967. It also emphasizes its rejection of all actions taken by Israel, the occupying power, to change its natural, geographical, and demographic characteristics, in clear violation of relevant Security Council resolutions, in particular resolutions 497 of 1981 and 465 of 1980. Syria also confirms that the Palestinian issue is the central issue of the Syrian people, which supports the inalienable and legitimate rights of the brotherly Palestinian people, particularly the right of return and self-determination, and the establishment of an independent state on its land with Jerusalem as its capital. Mr. President, at the end of 2013, Syria accepted the initiative of the President of the Russian Federation, His Excellency Mr. Vladimir Putin, and joined the Convention of the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, based on the need to establish in the Middle East a free zone of nuclear weapons and all weapons of mass destruction. It also wanted to prove to the whole world its commitment to stand against any use of chemical weapons. Syria fulfilled its obligations resulting from its accession to the Convention and completed its commitments despite the prevailing difficult situation. Were it not for the Syrian cooperation with the UNOPCW joint mission, it would have not been possible to complete the tasks of the mission. Mr. President, the Syrian Arab Republic would like to congratulate the Islamic Republic of Iran on its steadfastness and victory in achieving the historic agreement that fulfills the aspirations of the brotherly people of Iran and recognizes the right of Iran to use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, and lifts the sanctions imposed against Iran, as well as lifts the freeze on its assets and leads to opening up the international arena on this brotherly country. This agreement proves that the diligent and serious diplomatic approach is able to overcome all obstacles and result in peaceful and fair solutions for difficult issues. Syria stresses that establishing a zone free from all weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East is unachievable without the accession of Israel, the only nuclear power in the region, to all treaties banning such weapons, and to put its nuclear facilities under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. At the same time, we emphasize the right of all countries to acquire and develop nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. Mr. President, Syria emphasized that imposing unethical, unilateral, coercive economic measures by the United States and the European Union contradicts the rules of international law and the principles of free trade. On this basis, we congratulate Cuba on reaching an agreement with the United States that lifts the blockade imposed on it. We also renew our call to lift and stop all unilateral coercive measures imposed on Syria and the peoples of other countries such as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Venezuela, and Belarus. Mr. President, finally, I would like to say to all those who claim their keenness for the security and safety of the Syrian people the following. If you want to gain victory over terrorism and to achieve economic and political reforms, you have to honestly implement Security Council resolutions related to countering terrorism. Only then we can begin the countdown to the end of war in Syria, until we get to the final quarter hour and open the doors to implement what is agreed upon in the political dialogue. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and expatriates of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Gunnar Bragi Sveinsson, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iceland.
Madam President, the world has changed enormously since the establishment of the United Nations 70 years ago. It has become a real-world body with 193 member states. The UN has established a peacekeeping structure, has overseen the development of a strong human rights framework, and set up key agencies for development, humanitarian issues, and the environment. And we have seen the codification of international law under the auspices of the UN through such landmark treaties as the Law of the Sea Convention. Over the same period, the UN has witnessed the agonies and tragedies of several generations around the world, brought on by poverty, conflict, and natural disasters. The United Nations has not always met our expectations, but it is the only organization where all countries can work to solve the problems we have today and to seek to prevent potential problems for the future. This anniversary witnesses a striking example of how the world's nations within the Forum of the UN can work together to chart a future for our peoples. The 2030 Agenda and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda are achievements which we should be proud of. Iceland, together with many other member states, worked hard to achieve the balanced result we see today. We are particularly pleased with the prominence of gender equality and the empowerment of women, which are key to sustainable development. We are also pleased that sustainable management of natural resources is central for both these agendas. Managing the only two sources of food we have, the ocean and the land. Inefficient fisheries management, a lack of infrastructure in this field cost our societies around $50 billion every year. Also, arable land, the size of South Africa, becomes degraded every year. We now have a blueprint for fixing this, and Iceland is committed to contributing to these efforts. Another highly significant goal in terms of sustainable management of natural resources is number 7 on affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. We need to aim for the elimination of carbon-based fuels and, in the meantime, channel the enormous amount of subsidies in the sectors of fossil fuels, some $14.5 billion a day, towards renewable energy resources. This would be a good start, and here, those who count need to be counted. Iceland also worked hard with others to include language in relation to non-communicable diseases, including neurological disorders. The universal nature of our new common goals requires each of our states to contribute at the national, regional, and global levels. None of us can succeed alone, and Iceland is committed to playing its part in reaching those ambitious goals. Madam President, everywhere, we are witnessing the drastic consequences of climate change. Last month, I took part in the Global Leadership Conference in Alaska with other Arctic countries to draw attention to the impacts of climate change, which is particularly revealing in that region. Temperatures in the Arctic are increasing at more than twice the average global rate, and the fragile ecosystem of the region is increasingly at risk, and Arctic communities are experiencing firsthand the challenges of dealing with a rapidly changing climate. The consequences are far-reaching. Shrinking glaciers in the north contribute to higher sea levels in the south. But there is still time to turn things around. COP21 in Paris will be our chance, maybe our last one, to put us on track towards a sustainable future and take decisions based on the best available science. Iceland is committed to ambitious long-term global climate agreement and intends collectively with other countries in Europe to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% in 2030. Madam President, you asked us to focus on the road ahead for peace, security, and human rights. When injustice is the everyday experience of large part of the population, and when people have no voice, peace and security are at risk. And without peace and security, we will not achieve sustainable development. At the same time, peace and security cannot be used as a justification for violating human rights. The imposition of the death penalty should not be justified under the appearance of order and security. In this regard, the case of Ali Muhammad al-Nimr in Saudi Arabia, a minor when he alleged crimes took place, is particularly worrying. I call on Saudi Arabia to uphold its international obligations and commute his sentence. Madam President, one characteristic of just and human society is the treatment of its minorities and the most vulnerable. Iceland will continue to work with others for non-discrimination, including on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Human rights are for all men, all women, all girls, and all boys, not just for some. We, the peoples, includes everyone. Iceland will continue to be a champion of gender equality and empowerment of women, along with many other committed member states. At the beginning of this year, I co-hosted with my colleague from Suriname a successful barbershop conference here at the UN. The aim was to join others in getting men more active on gender equality. I saw it as a support for the He for She campaign run by UN Women. In the light of this success, Iceland intends to host barbershops in other international organizations that we are members of. Madam President, the smallness of our world is darkly highlighted by the ongoing migrant and refugee situation. In Europe, in particular, even before the Syrian crisis, we have witnessed the desperate efforts, often with tragic consequences, of men and women fleeing their own countries in search of a safe future for themselves and their children. The search for a better life is nothing new. About 1/5 of the Icelandic population left our country in the late 19th century in the face of extreme poverty and harsh weather conditions. For many Icelanders and millions of Europeans who took perilous journeys to North America, this was a matter of survival. Others were escaping injustice and political systems where they had no voice. The current refugee crisis is, however, unprecedented in recent times. The term migration hardly captures the severity of the situation. This is an exodus. We have all seen the figures. Only this year, some 500,000 refugees and migrants have crossed the Mediterranean to Europe, and millions have fled to neighboring countries. Here, I would like to pay tribute to Syria's neighbors who have quietly and resolutely given shelter to the great majority of refugees. The conflict in Syria, with its complex roots in the larger conflicts in the region, has produced a scale of suffering which we all hoped never to see again. The long-term solution has to be to solve the conflict in Syria and others alike by political means. The Security Council bears primarily responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. We call on all Security Council members to, in the words of the Charter, unite their strengths to halt the bloodshed consequences far beyond the region, and meanwhile, it is a humanitarian duty of the rest of the world to seek ways to reduce the suffering of the refugees. These are extreme circumstances and call for extraordinary measures. The Icelandic government has decided to allocate $60 million to counter the crisis to support the vital work of frontline UN institutions like the UNHCR, World Food Programme and UNICEF, and to welcome increased numbers of refugees to Iceland. This is, however, not a numbers game. There are different circumstances in different countries, but we all have to do what we can. These are defining moments. Iceland, Madam President, reiterates its strong conviction that the only path to peace between Israel and Palestine is a two-state solution. Both sides need to commit fully to this solution, and they must refrain from actions that undermine it. Of continued deep concern is the humanitarian situation of the Palestinians, particularly in Gaza, where we continue to call for the lifting of the blockade. Israel must abide by its obligations under international humanitarian law and human rights law. This includes to immediately stop the demolition of Palestinians' homes and to put an end on the displacement of Palestinians from the land. Terrorist activity from Palestinian elements is also totally unacceptable and can only undermine peace. We condemn all acts of violence against civilians. The safety and well-being of civilians of both sides must always be ensured. While the situation in the Middle East region gives little cause for optimism, there has recently been a triumph for diplomacy over conflict. I would like to congratulate all the parties which achieved the breakthrough agreement on a joint comprehensive plan of action on Iran's nuclear program. We hope to see this agreement to a more stable region. We should be careful not to forget all the disputes which, if not attended to, could flare up. Here I am thinking of the Western Sahara. On the 70th anniversary of the foundation of the UN, we should recall the basis tenets of the UN Charter and related instruments. This includes refraining from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. It is a matter of grave concern when a permanent member of the Security Council acts to undermine the territorial integrity of another. Rule of law and peaceful resolution of disputes are of existential importance for small states like mine. Madam President, the United Nations is not perfect. I would, however, like to compliment the determination with which Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has approached the shortcomings. There is important work underway to revitalize the General Assembly, and Iceland welcomes the resolution on this topic in relation to appointment of the Secretary General. And after a succession of 8 men in the position of Secretary General, it is high time for qualified female candidates to be seriously considered for this most important international position. The same applies for the position of the President of the General Assembly. The gender imbalance in high-level positions must be addressed to increase the credibility of the UN. Iceland has long supported the expansion in permanent and non-permanent seats in the Security Council. This is a difficult process, but we cannot ignore the increasingly indefensible situation in which the Security Council represents the world as it was in 1945. The danger is that its authority will gradually be undermined if it does not better reflect the world as it is. Iceland is ready to look at all options for squaring the circle. Meanwhile, Iceland has stated its support for the initiative by France and Mexico on regulating the veto and for the Code of Conduct on Security Council actions against genocide and other crimes against humanity, drafted by the ACT group of states. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the Foreign Minister of Iceland, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Sheikh Khalid bin Ahmed Al Khalifa, the Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Mr. President, at the outset, it is my pleasure to warmly congratulate your friendly country, the Kingdom of Denmark, on your election President of the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I wish you success in leading the work of the General Assembly and in bolstering the role that the Assembly plays in addressing the challenges that the world is facing today and the international community as a whole is facing. I also would like to thank your predecessor, Mr. Sam Kutesa, for all his efforts in conducting the business of the last session and for all his initiatives towards attaining our common goals. Likewise, I would like to express my heartfelt appreciation to His Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, who has spared no effort to improve the efficiency of the organization in the face of the increasingly complex problems and crises in the world. I commend his annual report on the work of the organization and the important steps that he has taken to address the numerous challenges and issues, including sustainable development, climate change, conflicts, and humanitarian disasters, as well as the refugee crisis, in addition to poverty and hunger in many developing countries. Mr. President, I would like at this juncture to express my heartfelt condolences and to totally submit myself to the will of Allah, and to offer our heartfelt condolences to the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, King of the Brotherly Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and to the Muslim nation as a whole, following the tragic stampede that occurred during this year's Hajj a few days ago. We highly value the great historic role played by the sisterly Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and its blessed efforts as guardian of this holy land and servant of the guests of the sacred shrines, dedicating all the means necessary to the organization of Hajj and Umrah and their rights. Anyone who denies this fact ignores the scope of the responsibilities that the sisterly Kingdom of Saudi Arabia discharges so ably. We strongly deplore the false allegations made by President Hassan Rouhani of the Islamic Republic of Iran in his statement before the General Assembly, and reject any belittling of this tremendous effort. Mr. President, the General Assembly of the United Nations just a few days ago took an important step towards humanity's welfare. This happened by the international community's approving of the post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. We made it a point to participate in this process, consistent with all our full support for the United Nations action in furtherance of the development goals and in continuation of the Kingdom of Bahrain's role in achieving remarkable results, as documented in international reports in the fields of education, health, youth empowerment, poverty alleviation, literacy, and the enhancement of the rights of human rights. Bahrain has been classified according to the United Nations Human Development Index, was classified among the countries with very high human development. It scored a 5% growth rate in the last 5 years, thanks to the process of reforms decided by His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, King of the Kingdom of Bahrain, as well as thanks to his profound interest in meeting the aspirations of the people of the Kingdom of Bahrain at all levels, political, economic, and social. We shall preserve and persevere in our development efforts by conceiving plans and programs for the implementation of the post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. We will also exert our efforts to enhance these developmental goals, and for that, my country will host the Arab Ministerial Conference on the implementation of the agenda in the Arab countries from December 6th to December 7th. This will be the first regional conference to be held in the world following the adoption of the post-2015 agenda. The world has testified to the success and excellence of the Kingdom of Bahrain in the field of sustainable development by the International Communication Union. The International Communication Union, which is known as, conferred the ICT in Sustainable Development Award for 2015, conferred it on His Royal Highness Prince Khalifa bin Salman Al Khalifa, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain, here in New York, thus confirming the esteem in which the Kingdom of His Royal Highness Highnesses are held, as evidenced by the series of distinguished awards in the recent past. Given the environment, given that the environment is one of the three dimensions of the sustainable development, we want to stress the importance of solidarity and joint action to address the major challenges of climate change. We look forward to the Conference of the Parties later this year in Paris, and we hope that it will reach a binding and ambitious agreement to deal with this phenomenon and its repercussions, notably on small island development states. Mr. President, this session coincides with the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, an organization that we all cherish, whose role we all appreciate, and which for us is indispensable. We shall endeavor relentlessly to attain its goals, especially in the light of the tragedies and hardships faced by humanity at the end of the Second World War, with its huge toll in lives, in displacement of peoples, and the obliteration of a great number of cultural monuments in many parts of the world. All this should make us firmly united, and should bring us to cooperating with each other on a transparent manner to avoid the recurrence of the past tragedies. It is no secret that these noble human goals have not been fully attained, yet we still maintain the hope of achieving them, thus turning a painful and cruel page and inaugurating a new era without wars. Our region had its share of these wars, war after war, albeit of different types and objectives, destructive. These wars have been destructive. We have seen confrontations with the occupier. We have seen opposition to foreign interference seeking to impose hegemony, undermine national sovereignty, as well as exploit extremist groups and organizations and finance them to jeopardize national gains and destroy cultural heritage and obliterate national identity. Facing these challenges is not easy or carpeted with flowers. Rather, it is a long and arduous road requiring uninterrupted work, persistent efforts, and a collective confrontation of difficulties to conquer. Paramount among these is the disregard by some, such as Iran, in the case of my country, of the principles of non-interference in the internal affairs and good neighborliness, and their exploitation of extremist groups, the provision of safe haven to fugitives, and the opening of training camps for terrorist groups, smuggling arms and explosives, as has happened to my country, where citizens and expatriates and the security personnel protecting them and the nation at large have been targets of murder and criminal acts that claimed 16 lives from security personnel and injured 3,000. These dangerous criminal acts go even further. Barely 2 days ago, the security authorities in the Kingdom of Bahrain discovered a cache of locally made bombs in the heart of a densely populated area, including large quantities that amount to 1.5 tons of highly explosive material destined for use in the manufacturing of such potent explosives as C4, RDX, and TNT, together with explosive chemical substances and a number of explosive devices ready to use, automatic weapons and guns, hand grenades, and quantities of ammunitions and wireless equipment. That's why I would like to state that the Kingdom of Bahrain and a number of sisterly countries in the region have attempted through different means and ways to invite Iran to seek normal, neighborly relations based on the respect of the sovereignty and the independence of nations and non-interference in their internal affairs. The security and stability of a state cannot be detrimental to those of another state. Iran would be better advised not to squander its resources or the resources of its people to promote its vested interests, but rather to use them to achieve development and progress and to build bridges with its neighbors so that all may live together in peace. However, Iran responded in an evil manner, and we were left with no option but to recall the kingdom's ambassador accredited to Iran and declare the charge d'affaires of the Iranian embassy persona non grata as part of the measures of the kingdom to protect its people and interests. Mr. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain and its sister countries of the GCC have not hesitated to support Yemen in response to a request by His Excellency President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi, President of the Republic of Yemen, to help the brotherly people of Yemen in the face of rebel groups benefiting from Iranian support. These groups turned their back on their commitments and laid their hands on the institutions of the state. Our aim was also to curb the deterioration of the security is a matter of principle and a long-standing position emanating from our conviction that Yemen's security and stability constitute an integral part not only of the security of the Arabian Peninsula, but also of the entire region at large. Hence the inevitability of military confrontation, as we had no other choice at our disposal. All roads were blocked by the obstinacy of the rebel groups and their belligerent designs for the people of Yemen and the region. To paraphrase my brother, the late Prince Saud al-Faisal, may he rest in peace, we are not warmongers, but when the war drums are beaten, we will be ready for it. This proves that the GCC countries are and have always been advocates of peace, not war. We are steadfast in our march towards the fulfillment of the aspirations of the Yemeni people, and we shall remain faithful to our position until those who took up arms lay them down. Those who overthrow the legitimate government abandon their cupidity and put an end to the occupation